This program is brought to you in association with First National Bank of Botswana.
Artificial intelligence, digitization, automation, robotics, and everything else that has to do with computers is what most people think when they hear about the Fourth Industrial Revolution, or 4IR for short. There has been so much discussed about the current and potential disruptive effects of 4IR technologies in advanced economies. For example, studies estimated that in the manufacturing sector alone, 4IR technologies could create a whopping 133 million jobs worldwide by the end of 2022. On the flip side, however, this means a displacement of 78 million jobs, with only 53 million new jobs created, which speaks to the economic disruption and widening inequality gaps that are less talked about. When zoning into the sub-Saharan Africa region, with much of the labor force comprising informal workers, Africa in Focus states that the Fourth Industrial Revolution technologies highlight a need to improve on already inadequate education systems, poor infrastructure, ailing access to technology, and so on and so forth. In a country such as Botswana, where there are still areas of low to no connectivity at all, where some communities do not have access to basic banking services and no access to other amenities needed to thrive in today's world, what key considerations are there to be made when seeking successful adoption of 4IR solutions? We have this conversation with Chief Operations Officer at Stencil Technologies, Mulibi Mapanyane.
I think one of the things we need to consider is that the technologies that have been invented and that are being used in this fourth industrial revolution were created to suit the markets that they've already been deployed in. So we can't really emulate exactly what has happened elsewhere. Our conditions are unique to ourselves, Botswana, and as a nation. And we really need to think about how we can adjust them or rework them to suit our conditions, to suit our needs. The number one thing that we always need to consider is to really have a full understanding of what the facts on the ground are. We have to be able to be pragmatic and call a spade a spade. We know where we are so that we can achieve what we want to achieve. So with that in mind, we have to look at ways that we can use technology to solve the issues of disparities in access and certain amenities. And those solutions are available.
Researchers in the United States of America have demonstrated that the skill bias of technological change with 4IR disproportionately affected routine and middle-skilled occupations, creating asymmetrical access to opportunities, to earnings and income between lower and highly educated workers, thereby exacerbating inequality trends. So, if that is happening in a developed economy such as that of the United States of America, what of an economy like Botswana that is still emerging?
You know, one of the key precepts of futurism when thinking about the future is that the future is not something that happens to you. We are all participants in the future that's being built for us. And so what we have to really consider is to consider what our individual roles are, right? So we're all participating in the building of the future that we're going to be a part of in the future. And that includes those semi-skilled workers, those middle class, those unskilled laborers. And every single individual has to look at the future that's coming and see how they're participating in it, not as a means of stopping the future from happening and keeping ourselves in a snapshot of the present, but what they can do to better influence the future for themselves and people like them. What is coming to us as a nation is something that we can build for ourselves. We can decide that this is the society that we want to have in the future. this is the technology that we want to have in the future. We can participate in it and we can build it for ourselves. And in fact, if we are good enough at it and determined enough, we can actually export it.
To address issues of an underskilled or even unskilled labor force, to take up and advance for our technology adoption, the African Union has suggested that member countries spend an additional 1% of GDP on developing STEM skills at secondary and post-secondary levels. But how feasible do you think this is looking at today's fiscal environment? Also considering that the African education system is widely considered inadequate despite the heavy investment that has gone into it.
Investing 1% of GDP in STEM really takes a lot of assumptions into mind. I'll put it this way. When you're thinking about the future, predictions are very, very difficult. All we can do is really look at patterns. Now, what we know for a fact is that our current education system, probably around the world, is inadequately preparing our children for the future that they're going to be a part of. That's because technology changes so very quickly that we don't actually know what the world our children is going to live in. And this has changed over many years. Now, when we invest 1% of GDP into STEM education, we may think, across Africa, the playing field is not level. So it will have disproportionate effects. It also assumes that the mathematics that we're using now is actually the mathematics that's going to be required in the future. The third assumption is that people are not learning outside of the education system. So I'm not saying let's just throw up our hands and not do anything about, trying to prepare people for the future through math. But perhaps we need to consider a mindset change where it is not the job of the state to mandate the type of education that we're having, but provide an environment where the world around you can offer the education that you need.
Our conversation thus far has been around solutions for the future. But what of now? How do you think that those who've not had the opportunity or access to participate currently in the fourth industrial revolution can be brought along on this journey? What immediate solutions do you think can be utilized to bridge this divide?
It's interesting that we're talking about the fourth industrial revolution, because there are some that actually believe that the fourth industrial revolution has passed. The fourth industrial revolution, or is not passed, but is transitioning to the fifth already. The fourth being a knowledge-based economy, and the fifth being almost a passive economy. Now, that passive economy really comes into play when the level of production completely outstrips the level of human involvement or input. What does that mean? It means we're making so much from so little human input that it doesn't actually make sense to distribute it using the traditional means of distribution, such as commerce, etc., etc. So what are humans going to be able to contribute to the fifth industrial revolution, or indeed the fourth? Or now imagine if they haven't even made it into the fourth revolution, but the rest of the world is in the fifth, and there's multiple billionaires across the world and the massive inequality. The answer to that is quite simple. Well, change happens everywhere, all the time, but it doesn't happen everywhere at once. We need to make the decision, I'm going back to that participatory future. We need to make the decision about what it is that we are aiming for and driving for. We can we will find it very difficult to walk the same path that other economies or nations or continents have walked in order to achieve at the same, to arrive at the same place. Because by the time we arrive there, they will be gone. So let's plot a point that we want to achieve, we want to move towards, set ourselves up to get there, and have a full understanding of the resources that we actually have, not the convenient truths, but the real truths, so that on our journey, we're actually able to make it. So fundamentally, we need to make sure that everybody is involved in what it is that we're doing, break it down to the lowest common denominator, which is we all as humans want to thrive and achieve our goals.